Welcome back, everybody. My name is Geraldine de Bastion, and I have the honor of being your stage host here today. The last session today is going to link in a little bit to our previous discussion because it touches on the issues of how digitization and new technologies are changing the way that fashion is being produced, and therefore also the way that we design and consume fashion. And we want to have a bit of a deep dive into this topic and specifically look at different trends in production, on demand, nearshoring, and the way that we're using future technologies such as 3D printing to create the garments that we're going to wear today and in future. And I have 5 experts here joining me on stage for this discussion who cover kind of the depth and bandwidth of this topic matter. So please welcome with me Pawel Broński from Strima. Applause. Katarzyna Slezak from K&K. Marte Hentschel from Sourcebook. Luca Traian from Gemini CAD Systems, and last but not least, Carmel Snow, 3D knitwear designer.
Please.
Thanks. So?
Yes, perfect. I will go in the middle and feel wonderful being framed by all of you. So I just gave some buzzwords to start with, but to begin this session, and since we're quite a few people on this panel covering different angles of the topic, I would like just to do one round and give you all the opportunity to introduce yourselves in a bit more detail and which area of this topic of future production it is that you work on. Should we start with you and go around?
Okay, hi, my name is Katarzyna. I'm coming from Poland. I represent the God-certified laundry and the dye house. We are working on our sustainability from about 10 years. We have finally received certification after 6 years, so at this moment it's our 3rd year when we have certification. It was very tough path which we must have been going through because of the machines, of the technology aspects and innovations. Now we are working on the new project of the upcycling clothes, which I would like to also underline during the fashion on demand, on which I feel very good. Plus, we have some point of view about the future, how the future of the fashion should look like. We have some ideas and
share them with us. What should it look like?
For us, it's very important point. Because the habits and the rules which are at the moment, they will not work in the future. We must change our way of thinking. It's not just that I decide at this moment that I want to be sustainable and I will do everything with that. From my side, it took us 10 years to transform full company into sustainable way. So in our opinion, for example, AI-powered fashion will help us to reduce the full landfills of the clothes and the water waste and so on. Because when the whole algorithms will be deciding what we really want, so what for produce other stuff. If the algorithms from AI-powered fashion will tell us these clients like white t-shirt, gray pants. So if you would like to have any new projects, let's make them on demand. Let's make them with the 3D printing, which maybe also can be recycled one, so it's our way of thinking.
Thank you. It's always nice to hear somebody looking into a hopeful digital future, especially as the last panel we also outlined a lot of the points of critique and risks to do with data and data protection. So it's good to hear somebody looking into a prosperous AI future. Thank you very much. Would you like to go next?
Yeah. Thank you, Geraldine. My name is Marte Hentschel. I'm the CRO and founder at Sourcebook, which is a B2B matchmaking platform that connects brands with suppliers and manufacturers. And our goal is to help brands to establish local supply chains and to establish short runs, on-demand production. So actually, it's an online directory, and my background is production management, and I was annoyed by the inefficiencies and the the waste that was generated in and overproduction still generated. So I'm as well a big believer in production on demand. Doesn't have to be personalization and lot size one, but beautiful materials shouldn't be wasted. So let's only produce stuff that is really needed.
I learned crazy statistics when I was here in February. Like 17% of all garments bought are never even worn once, which I thought was insane.
Yeah, plus 20. Yeah, plus the cut waste and end of roll and so much more. We talked about that early this morning. So there's not only the large number of unsold, unused, never worn clothes, it's also everything from the field to fiber to processing, weaving, cutting and so on, where waste is generated.
So this is something that both of you feel strongly about and a point of inspiration to come from. I try to do my homework for today and tomorrow because I'm not from the fashion industry, so I try to read up on like biggest trends in da-da-da. And digital knitting was actually amongst those, celebrated as one of the leading trends, which is what you do. And you're also based at MIT, which is sort of at the forefront of technological future pathing for the rest of society. So do you feel like you're on the forefront of a revolution in the fashion industry?
Yeah, I mean, I feel so I'm a 3D knit designer, and I have my own brand and consulting agency, and then also started a knitting lab at MIT. So obviously I'm about this life and fully fashion engineered textiles, and I think there's so much potential. I mean, we're not going to stop mass producing, but like, how can we make it so much better? And by using sustainable materials and engineered textiles with like the least amount of post-production and cut and sew and like assembly involved, I feel like there's so much potential to make products and garments and so many things using 3D knitting. And yeah, I love it. Like, there's so much hope. There's still a lot of hurdles, but there's a lot of forward movement too. Yeah.
Give us a little bit of an insight into how, without like spilling all your beans for us, but like how does 3D knitting work and what happens in your lab at MIT?
Yeah, okay, well, so there's a few types of, so 3D knitting it's really industrial knitting, and then there's weft, warp, and circular knitting, and those are kind of the three main industrially knit machines. My focus is on weft knitting, so it's kind of like Stolzstrickmaschine is what I use, like Reutlingen, Baden-Württemberg, like Deutsche Maschine energy, and that is like what all the fly knits and all these things have been programmed on. And that's kind of like where they got their buzz, but like the Germans and the Japanese have been doing this for ages. But really you program, because all knitting is loops, you know, like when your tights run, loops are connected on like wovens that are like XY axis. Probably a lot of people know this, but I'm just saying it. And so, yeah, you program the loop language on the CAD, and then you control the tension, the needle action, the stitch allocation, the yarn, and the form. So there's a lot of engineering, but it's all through this like loop situation. And then on the machine, you feed it to the machine, and then you set up your yarns and the feeders, and then through your program and through the yarn allocation, you start to create material. So that's the general of 3D knitting. And then with each different system, like circular, there's different, obviously loads of different details, but it's really the similar soul of the textile and the same structural form. But yeah, in the context of MIT, I mean, I've been doing 3D knitting around the world. I've lived a lot in Berlin and in New York and worked in factories in Lima and in other parts of South America as well. And then I was living back in Ecuador, and MIT was like, come and start a knitting lab. And so then I have been there for like a year. And it's the research, so I have more my brand work, which is more zero waste fashion, and then the MIT work is active textiles. So textiles that like react to your environment, that are also engineered and fully fashioned with the least amount of post-production, but it's a lot about yarn innovation.
And I hope we can dive a bit deeper into the future of materials and 3D ... whether it's knitting or printing in the course of this conversation, or both. Excellent, thank you. So moving on to Luca, give us a little bit of an insight into Gemini CAD systems.
First of all, I would like to say that that was the cutest explanation about knitting. It's just loops. So even I could understand it.
It's very complicated, but you know, you got to like break it down.
Absolutely. It's crazy complicated, I would say, but you made it simple for us. Well, our company, Gemini, is in charge of transforming fashion as art into fashion as item to produce. We are the guys in charge of the technology of computer-aided design, specialized for fashion. It's the moment when you transform a sketch into patterns, into things that you can use later in production, whether you go to cutting, whether you go to digital printing, and so on. So we are this necessary link between the artistic world and the technical world. And this is what our company is doing, providing technology, software technology for this part. Quite a boring activity until recently. Until recently.
Because?
Because exactly what you talked about. The world is shifting from mass production. That means you need to make a pattern set and everything once, and then you produce it 20,000 times. But now you need to produce one unique item. That means for every unique item, you need a set of digital patterns. You need a digital path, including several components, up to the final physical product. And that means our area of expertise, where we must provide digital support, software support to all the stages of product development, customization, and production, becomes very important and very relevant and present not only once in 20,000 items, but for every single product.
I already see some sort of nuances of the debate creeping in here. Last but not least, Pawel, please give us a bit of an introduction to your work.
Paweł Broński. I lead the company Strima since 29 years. But the reason why I am here invited is probably the taxi idea. After the big crisis, 2008, we imagined that the big concerns will be no more so brave, and they will limit a little bit the production in Far East. And we thought about the solution for Europe. Since 8 years, more or less, we created a taxi atelier, which is the idea of the complete solution for fashion production in Europe. Yes, and we try to follow this idea with success, sometimes with also less success, but we have a feeling that nearshoring and production on demand is more and more important question in Europe. But I told you also that if it goes about generally, if it goes about the sustainability, I may be not the one who should be here invited, because I am not only optimistic. In my opinion, we speak too much and we act too less, generally in Europe.
I want to get to that. Applaus, bitteschön. I want to get to that point in just a minute. So I have a couple of general questions, and I want to throw at all of you and then try to dig a bit deeper into some of the different, especially technological aspects. The days of big warehouses storing mass-produced and perhaps overproduced clothing, are they coming to an end?
Hopefully. Hopefully, yes. Because we have noticed that those stocks, there are quite a lot of them, and we encourage our clients, first of all, to produce less. Our production quantities started from 51 pieces, but we can still produce from 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3, 10 pieces. This quantity from 1 to 51 pieces depends on the price only, but production prices, so they are not, we have low down our quantities. Second of all, we encourage our clients to upcycle their clothes. So for example, you produce at our dye house some garments, and you decided, okay, I like this style, and for sure it will be the best core fashion trend. And unfortunately, after the season, you realize it was not okay. So it was not scored correctly. That's why we encourage them to upcycle these clothes, so re-dye them, re-wash them one more time, and put them on the market one more time with the labels, showing clients that it is upcycled garment which was not sold from previous collection. So clients will also know that clothes which they are buying are not used one, they are just refreshed.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of we all want this in a way, but then it's the like macro implication of it. Oof. Implication, there we go, words. Because I think, especially, well, in the context of Europe, but if you're really talking about the world, I mean, I don't know, I've worked in some crazy factories and doing innovation and sustainability with this whole new like knit manufacturing system, but it's a massive change to implement it on a scale. Like I think as individual designers or smaller brands, I think it's very like en moda and like happening a lot, but I want it to go away, but I feel like it's a really big thing, like just all over the world, it's a big shift, I think. I believe in it, but it's a massive change.
Yeah, it's a massive change, but if the companies will be still afraid of showing the stocks, because it's the shame to having the stocks, and they won't start doing something with that. For example, law in France already forbidden to put it on the landfills and destroy them. They must do something with that. They must improve themselves to upcycle them somehow. And it's showing already that in thanks of government's law, we will be able to upcycle clothes. And that's why I'm here to also tell people, stop producing mass production. Mass production is also, for me, 300 pieces from one style.
So that's like, from a fashion angle, we live in this world of fast fashion. And big brands are busy trying to get the next thing out there. My guess is that that is going to increase. You know, you want the T-shirt with the meme that's hot today and not the one that was hot yesterday on your shirt. Is that not one of the key factors from an economic point of view to push for the end of mass production and over-storage? Because we've been having a lot of conversations here on stage today that just being a good person and more environmentally friendly, of course, isn't going to cut it.
I don't. I have to agree with you that there will be probably both words existing side by side. I also don't see a massive transition in the next, let's say, decade. Yes. One thing is that if we look at the numbers, consumption is increasing year by year, and there's no sign that this will kind of shift. On the other hand, let's take the 500 million T-shirts alone that are sold every year in Germany to 80 million people. I mean, so they are designed and made for a short lifespan and wasted, but there are also all the other regions globally where people want to get access to consumption, and they want to consume. So we won't change that, but what we see here, especially in Europe and in the US and probably in Japan and Korea as well, is through technology access to production infrastructure, access to small volumes of materials. We outsourced our production capacities 3 decades long, and it was just not possible for small and medium-scale brands to access production and producing under 1,000 pieces per style, which is insane. So this is through technology, through digital tools, through networks, designers can get access to a small run production. That's probably different from a couple of years back.
I would like to add, if possible, that whenever we get the questions a question like this one, we tend to answer based on the behavior of people and organization within Western Hemisphere. But in terms of consumption, we must not forget that we have India and China and other countries in Asia where the consumption, the domestic consumption is huge and increasingly at a high speed. Therefore, their behavior becomes important when we analyze the global situation. And maybe there will be evolution in the behavior here in Europe or in the United States. However, the situation in China, in terms of consumption, in terms of behavior of the consumer, it's something that we must take in consideration right now, and it's not going in the right direction.
So I'm assuming that's rather a cause for concern if you take that into the equation.
Definitely, definitely. My opinion is that the big producers of garments, not necessarily because they are very keen to the planet and ecosystem and everything, but for pure costing reasons, they are very careful about not throwing away resources. Their process is usually quite efficient. They fight for every cent. So at least from this point of view, even the stocks that they have, probably, and not probably, I'm pretty sure about this, they use all the possible means to reduce these stocks. They use all the possible means to anticipate consumption. If it's possible, and if there is a solution based on artificial intelligence or whatever to anticipate consumption of white t-shirts or gray pants, they will use it, or they are already using it. And if such solution does not exist yet, okay, that's why they have big stocks. If such solution would exist today and would be able to predict in general terms what would be the production, be sure that big companies like Inditex or Adidas or whatever big brand will be using it instantly. Again, not necessarily because they, but because of cost. They are not happy to have stocks. They are not happy to get returns from shops, and they would apply it. However, I am quite skeptical that today such solutions really exist. There are a lot of projects, there is a lot of research, but when you go really to applications, it is still quite limited. That's why we must remain pragmatic and to say, if something exists, these big guys who could save hundreds of millions of dollars from stocks, they would use it.
There seems to be, at least this came up also a number of times today, so just to add that question to what we're talking about, at least a trend to produce, let's say, closer at hand. So the idea that a product gets flown 3 times across the globe before it reaches its end consumer is not only going out of fashion because of ecological reasons and a growing ecological consciousness, but perhaps also for some sort of less greater reasons like imperialist tendencies and sort of America First idea of producing things inside the country again. But that does seem to have a growing popularity as a notion. So within these trends that you'll see, isn't sort of producing closer by also part of that? Mm-hmm. No?
I can try to answer to this. I really doubt that an American business will start to produce something locally only because he saw the president say, let's make America great again. They need practical reasons. They need cost efficiency. So yes, it's one thing to see it on screen, and it's another thing to apply it in your own business. Therefore, to make this evolution, you must look at all the factors and ignore the public image.
So, living this life,
okay.
Let me comment, because that's exactly what I'm doing right now. And I think it's all over the world very trendy, and definitely trendy in the United States right now. But the systems of implicating it aren't really in practice, but the branding is in practice.
Definitely.
So I've done that, and like I'm a fellow at AFOA, which is like Advanced Functional Fabrics of America. And it's all about like making in America again. And I think there's loads of prototyping going on, but like everyone has forgot how to do like fabrication. So it's kind of funny because most of the like industrial textile manufacturing systems have died there, and now they're trying to restart them. But there's a big disconnect. And even like I'm a designer for Ministry of Supply, which is another like knitwear brand situation, and their on-demand manufacturing is like me in the middle of the night re-engineering a blazer, like crying because the machine is so hard. So like it's not really there yet, at least in the context of engineered knitting. And yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of buzz about it, but there's still I'm agreeing, like there's still a huge gap from like what the branding says and like what I'm actually doing, which is like not fun.
Let me get the other side of the panel in on this before we get right back to the point that you just made, which I didn't know that you were also involved in Ministry of Supply, so that's super interesting to hear, and that was in my notes to talk about as an example. But how do you think that is true for Europe? This idea about nearshoring and in-house demand, is that not a big trend also happening at the moment that gives a little bit of hope, even if it's not only for ecological reasons?
I think it's less a trend than a revival, because like 90% of all production companies and artisans gave up their business. So they have a massive problem with the overaging staff, outdated machinery, outdated also access to communication skills. They still work with fax machine, if someone remembers that communication tool from the last century, but they are very, very skilled and very experienced, and we don't value those skills and those experiences anymore, so they have trouble finding young people to hand over their skills. But they're still there. There are 200,000 companies in Europe that still produce. Most of them are really small. Very few of them have websites. They can't market themselves. They are not the best skilled probably in writing cool marketing text and post snappy images on social media channels. But there's definitely a need for collaborating with artisans. In Europe alone, there's thousands of regions where there are heritage skills still remaining, like screen printing in Italy, embroidery in the Ukraine. I could talk about that forever.
This is so important, and not just here, but like again, like looking at it globally and artisans across the world. It's such an important issue. Just very quickly though, how do we get into this? How do we market this without getting into some weird nationalistic sort of field? How do we market this kind of way of production trend without tapping into populist stuff?
You first.
It's hard to answer. First of all, usually two like-minded parties meet because they're madly in love with well-made, beautiful products that really serve the wearer. Let's not call them consumers. So that makes it potentially easier to come to a good result and to establish a successful collaboration. But there are cultural gaps, there are generation gaps, and there's definitely a right-wing movement in Europe that we suffer from. So we have to draw a fine line, and we have to be very careful. But if like-minded people that are driven by the same mission create beautiful products, then I think we can solve that storytelling issue.
If I
Please.
can to interrupt, I would like to ask you if you can imagine how many string hashtag fashion designer you will find in Instagram. 14 million fashion designer, yeah? And guess how many tailor? 1,300,000, 10 times less. Yes? If I told you I'm a little bit skeptic, the reason is someone has to do this job. And the problem is, we are living in 2019 now, and everybody likes to be the fashion designer. But nobody, or almost, or very less people like to be the tailor or dressmaker. And this is also the problem of our time here in our hemisphere.
So let me ask you a question on that. And again, I am not from the fashion industry. How good a designer can you be without knowing your traits? As in, do you need to have some kind of handicraft in order to to be a good designer, A, and B, what about the robots?
Can you imagine?
Robots?
Excuse me. Can you imagine? No robots, no chance. Fashion is an art. Fashion is an art, and but okay. Wait a moment. Imagine Chanel, Pierre Cardin, Yamamoto, all of them tailor. Yes, first tailor, then fashion designer. Are here fashion designer? Who is the tailor, by the way? Yes.
Oh, we have.
Congratulations. Yes, but you know exactly that many fashion designers, they don't know how to sew, how to be the tailor. Yes, and this is the reason why the nearshoring and the production on demand will be very difficult. I am dreaming about it. It will be good for me because my idea for Europe is to develop this this way. But,
yes, but you don't encourage us to such behave. You don't encourage us be fashion designers in new generation.
No, that's not
I
true.
like to
Actually,
say-
by
I
all
like-
activities,
I like,
Pawel
to
is
say,
doing
I like
this.
to say only that even Goethe had gesagt, even Goethe said, knowledge is not enough. You have to act. Yes.
We act and we encourage
encourage. You know, everybody encourage, but in the dream, and this is the problem.
We
yes.
don't encourage in the dream.
I want to say only. We have to act. Yes. We have to
act.
look in ourselves.
Okay,
We act.
so 1 second. Where do you see this sort of being unfair on your generation? Because that's exactly what you're trying to do.
Okay, so I understand your point of view, Instagram hashtags, fashion designer. For me, in nowadays, sometimes it means also tailor. Some fashion designers are also tailor. Tailor is a word from about 20 years ago. It's being used as the tailor atelier, and now fashion designer is being used like for everything. But under these two words, fashion designers are also the tailors, are also the people who know how to sew.
So let's cut short the Instagram discussion because I understand a lot of that might be branding. Like if you could have the liberty of, you know, calling yourself this or that, why not choose the creative part on top of it too? But this sort of marrying of crafts and art is...
Well, yeah. So 2 points to follow up with that. First of all, I'm a fashion designer, and I do craft, and I do tailor, so it does exist.
And the technical.
And I'm technical. I'm very
technical designer.
I'm wild, but I'm technical. So what's up?
That's
Okay.
important.
So it's possible, but it's rare, and it's hot. I make it hot. So that's just how you brand and present yourself. But at the same time, there is less craft is less respected and less important in fashion. Go to Lower Manhattan. Go to streetwear spaces, go to V-Files. I love V-Files. But at the same time, you're like, I'm a graphic designer, put it on a hoodie, brah, that's a brand. It's not like fashion, it's not about like, how is the woven, it's about like, how do you brand yourself on the internet? So I think both is happening. Like, I'm for crafting, but in 2019, there has to be branding, and that's the bridge between factories. Like, I work with loads of factories that you like need to oma, you need to know the abuelita, and you need to know them to get into the factory, to do the work that you want to do, to make your fun pieces. But the bridges aren't built, and the bridges have deteriorated, and so now it's like, how do we rebuild the bridges?
You
Okay,
know, excuse me.
Okay, one more thing, but then I want to ask my robot question.
2 minutes only, maybe, yes, okay. Excuse me, you are the dominator here.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
No, please go ahead.
No, I like to say only that I have many experience in the last months in Berlin, especially here. I am from Poland. We have a small majority here, I think. And you know, in the last recent months, I met many people, very nice people. They are designers here. And they make a good job, yes. But no one of them brave enough to take a responsibility to employ the people to produce by themselves. All of them try to produce in another countries where it's cheaper, but they have no quantity. They like to produce, you know, one model, one size, 5 pieces, what is impossible. And this is the reason why we'll be very developed if the people don't change the mind, if the people don't start to think about own responsibility and own production. Yes.
I think we're all happy to agree on that. So to bring it back to that point, I think that's going to, everybody's nodding along with that. This is going very swiftly, so I do want to bring in a couple of these technological questions before we run out of time. The robots were shot down super quickly, but in any other industry, if we were talking about the future of production and the future of labor to do with creating those products, robots would be very much the answer. How come that was shot down so quickly by all of you guys? Luca?
I'm the digital guy, so I should answer to this. It's not a question if robots will come into this industry. They are already here. Not since yesterday. We have robots everywhere in apparel manufacturing. But don't imagine those kinds of robots like RoboCop or whatever. You have robots in your machinery.
Existing pattern sewing machine which can produce one jacket totally with one machine, yes?
Most of these automatic sewing machines, these are robots, okay? They don't look like robots, okay? So please first change your mentality what a robot means. Robot means from rabota, which means to work in Slavic language, okay? So every machine which does a job pretty much automatic is a robot. So number one, robots are already here. Then when will be this generation of robots that will be able to do everything, you know, like take the cloth and sew it? It will not be Thursday next week, definitely. It will not be in one particular date. It will happen gradually. Then later, I don't know, maybe in 1 or 2 years, we will have a robotic arm moving some piece of cloth. It's already here, by the way. Yeah? So we will have slight, small improvements, incremental improvements, which are already happening, as I said. There will be robots, there are robots, and this is a continuous process. Yes, the fashion industry is way behind automotive or electronics or other industries, but not because people in this industry are not open-minded about technology or robots. No, it's for a very simple and stupid reason. The cloth is flexible, okay? If you take all other industries, cars are rigid, iPhones are rigid, everything is rigid. When you work with rigid objects, you can use manipulation, you can use robots. Well, in our damn industry, it's flexible. That's why we cannot yet use robots for everything. I've done my case. Okay.
Thank you very much for that. I think that deserves an applause to it. Yeah.
Oh, I just think
I would like to also add up. Yeah.
Oh, mine's quick. It's just humans and machines. We're not anywhere near just machines. I don't think that's realistic yet. And I don't want it to be realistic, really, either.
Yes, I would like to also add up that this year, during the Chinese fashion show innovation, one of the winners was the Deep Vogue, who has used the algorithms from AI growth fashion to design the winning collection. So the computer decided from the trends which were on the market, so from the trends which people likes, so machines has designed the...
Would you please define what design means?
Design means
we need this definition.
Definition.
Yes.
For me, designing is adding up fabric, threads, shape, and the colors. Okay,
that's a good definition of design. And that's why I ask you, what do you understand by design? Because that defines the trend, how it should look. Then design means also something very particular. How to make the seam allowance where you make the thread, how to make the corner, how to fold.
It's also important, but I would like to underline that
that's why I want to differentiate.
Plus AI
I'm not saying,
are comfortable.
Yes, in the first part, in suggesting trends, in doing stuff like this, yes, AI is very good. And the big companies, believe me, they are using it big time. And that was a reply about the stock. If that would be a solution about predicting the stock, believe me, they would use it today.
They are not able to use it today because they are working on it. For example, Zalando is working, Amazon is working also on the AI solutions. There are Stitch Fix in United States where they have already some automation for the algorithms where you have to go through 50 questions, what you like, what the shape to fit into the trends.
So obviously, you know, this is the beginnings of it, and that's a little bit of a glimpse into the future, just as we're guessing, you know, we see the sort of path ahead of us. And I want to get back to the 3D printing topic before we run out of time, because that is another technology that we know it's in its infancy and has a very long way to go. So several things on this. You mentioned Ministry of Supply, and that's one of these examples going around the media of how 3D printing is now ready for sort of supporting mass production. However, it's also one of the questions that is still kind of out there, because at the moment, I have not come across so many makerspaces or entities that are sort of on the pioneering front of the 3D printing movement actually being a part of this, but rather on the sort of tinkering, experimental, playful side, perhaps the sort of more artsy design side of things rather than the production side. So is this one of the big examples and sort of the path ahead again?
Well, a main differentiation when you say 3D printing, it's additive manufacturing. So Ministry of Supply is not 3D printing, they're 3D knitting. There's actually, the way, again, when I talk about branding, there's a lot of, I don't work with them anymore, but they're still part of my MIT research. But I've talked with them about how they present, and it might be good for the internet, but it's not technically correct. Yeah. But then it's like, hot. But then it's like, what's real? Anyways. But yeah, there's also like the Fab Textiles and a lot of maker spaces, which like I was just in Barcelona with them last week doing work, and like there's a lot of interesting people playing, but again, none of it is in like production or reality or in the world. And I think like what Ministry of Supply and other people are trying to do is a beautiful idea, and obviously everyone in knitting wants this right now, but there's a big like lapse between the CAD, re-engineering, and on-demand making, and all of that takes like 2 days when everyone's kind of saying that it takes 2 hours. And so then people like me, who are designers and programmers, are kind of like losing your minds because there's a gap in the CAD. Not that you made the CAD, but but the CAD is like from the 90s, and there's still a long way. But also like, last point, my lab, the self-assembly lab at MIT, is all about additive manufacturing, and they do a lot of digitally printing, 3D printing on fabric. So that's the thing that's happening. Like Iris van Herpen is doing it. Like that's also something that's in the fashion space. But again, 3D knitting, 3D printing on fabric are different, things. But all in the form of additive manufacturing. Well, I guess they're both in the neighborhood of additive manufacturing.
So how ready? Okay, again, several questions. How ready is additive manufacturing to become a key part of the fashion production industry?
0.0001.
Okay, great. That was
Mine's a little less heavy. Mine's a little less heavy.
Yeah.
I think.
Are you below or above 1%?
I'm more above. It's a low percent, but I'm more above. I mean, I feel like there's so many places to have your atelier function in this way. It's the context of large-scale cool, you'll have a pop-in atelier in Neukölln that's like all additive manufacturing and amazing, but then there's still the warehouse in somewhere else in the world with loads of T-shirts. So they're both existing, and I think there's totally a big percentage of possibility.
And one more question. It's very humbling to hear that that's where it's at the moment, but that's also kind of the feeling that I got in my research leading up to this panel.
That's my opinion.
And also the maker spaces that I'm involved in. Like I said, I think there's a lot of great experimental prototyping going on, but in the sense of actually being a stepping stone in the production mechanism, it seems very far away. The jury is out, however, whether that's even a desirable thing. I have read very contradictory studies on the environmental desirable effects of 3D printing or additive manufacturing replacing mass production. One never quite knows whether some of these studies are influenced by the one or other side, but what is your take on that?
The big news that will definitely be a breakthrough, a revolution, and that could achieve this kind of change from mass production to mass customization via 3D additive printing is the moment when we will open the news and we will read that some research team develop a new polymer or a new again, I'm talking about material science, okay? A new polymer, a new something that can be used instead of melted plastic, because 3D printing today means melting plastic.
But isn't so much of that happening? People are printing with resin, with liquid metal, with chocolate, with all kinds of stuff.
But again, we need something flexible. We need a molecule, we need a polymer, we need a material that must be flexible, that can imitate the natural fibers in order to start to replace our existing clothes. I'm not saying this is not happening. I'm saying that at least me, I do not have access to know what happens, because this happens in some laboratories at a certain level.
Yes.
Okay, it's not definitely in the fashion industry. We will be the beneficiary or the victims of this big breakthrough. Okay, but this will come from this kind of this area of human knowledge, from the science of the new materials. And when this will happen, it will be a big, big change.
I'm going to bring you back in on this in just a sec, but you were also nodding along, Martin.
I have something. I would like to say something on behalf of Luca also and myself. How do you save? How we can save environment much more effectively? The sources join our co. An estimated 400 billion square meter of textiles are manufactured annually, of which 15% ends up wasted on the cutting room floor. Yes, 15% of 400 billion square meter of textile is in the production is a waste. And Gemini have a solution. I am competitive to him, and I will not tell about me, but using the nesting of CAD, you can save 5% of this. 20 billion square meter textile can be saved if the world use CAD software for nesting.
This is this kind of, I'm going to get philosophical here for just a sec, glimpse into the future. Paul Mason argues this in his book, Post-Capitalism, how the digital is influencing the physical, and he uses the example of airplane doors, because through the kind of technology that you use and produce, and 3D modeling, simulations, virtual reality, you can reduce the weight and the production cost of a door like that, in order to reduce the physical costs in the real world, and gives this idea of how we're heading into this different future based on data.
Excuse me, what do you mean if you say 3D? What do you mean? Shoes? Trousers? What do you mean 3D? Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I don't understand.
But I
cannot imagine 3D in the garment.
Why?
It's more difficult. What Pawel wants to say is that there are technologies today available. We work with these technologies, and we work on these technologies to further develop it, which contribute massively. Like this nesting process, we are not champions, we are one of the players. Like, for example, how you save ink on printing. We are with Epson here, and we discovered together that we can save 28% ink from production of digitally printing items. But none of these technologies are fancy enough, like the 3D. And that's why Pawel got angry. Because 3D, I say this, in 5 years, less than 0.1% of all the garments produced in the world will be 3D printed. Do you agree with me on this, Carmel? Less than 0.1% of all garments produced.
3D printed or?
Yes, 3D printed. Yeah, probably will be 0. So we are wasting time.
I can't agree.
3D
of course, this is a panel. That's why we need different opinions.
A button. You can produce a button with.
I'm sorry to include you on this side of the panel for just a sec, but as we're kind of running out of time, I'm going to shift over here for just a moment to have these ladies have a word. Marta, you've been listening to this, and I would love to learn from you what your opinion is on this. Also, if this is something that features in the work and the companies that you advise, are they thinking about this kind of thing?
Everyone is driven by the need to innovate and transform their businesses. So, but let's probably not stick to specific technologies and their benefits and weaknesses for a moment. But what I find interesting is the cultural perspective to empowering the consumer to become a creator. So, it's not only automation and digitization is not only happening in the manufacturing side to make industry scale production more flexible and reduce inefficiencies and so on. It's also giving access to technology for a wide range of consumers, meaning the reduction of the size of those machines, making desktop production or in-store manufacturing possible. So it changes completely the role of the consumer because he can become a co-designer. Not everyone is talented enough, and also the party starts. Okay, let's wrap up.
No, without us.
I just want to say there's a cultural shift coming with access to desktop production, and this is what I find amazing. If you have a community knitting machine somewhere close to you, you can knit with your neighbors. If you have a community 3D printer, any idiot can use a 3D printer. It's very accessible, and it will become more accessible. It will become more usable. You have beautiful interfaces. So actually, everyone can knit. Everyone can print. Everyone can sew in the future, and this will also change the relation between brands, producers, and consumers.
Excuse me,
That's right.
you asked me to encourage you, and I would like to encourage all of us.
Yes.
It goes about repair and altering. Nobody's speaking about it. Nobody, because it's no business. Yes, it's also against my business. But millions of people worldwide repair old garments, repair the leather products, the bags, etc., etc. Yes, and why is not a fashion catchword? Because it's no business. Yes, and repair and altering, it should be one of the main subject here. Yes, maybe next year.
Absolutely, and we have in other panels, though, touched upon regulatory measures to change that situation. So we talked earlier about Sweden and repair culture and different tax mechanisms to encourage that becoming a business. So it's a very important point. I'm going to look out there to see if anybody has a question that they really want to ask this panel. No immediate hands going up because
Everybody wants to go to the party.
and I can't throw, so it could have gotten dangerous at this point. Let's do a closing round, and I wanted to give you a chance to come back on this discussion about the future of additive manufacturing. I want to attempt a wild glimpse into the future before we end this panel. As we said earlier, you're based at MIT, which is where the future seems to be bred, or at least a lot of the technological future seems to be created. And the way that we're talking about additive manufacturing today, this point about soft materials, I know that there's whole institutes at MIT thinking about future materials, about changeable materials, and I have read about a startup that is trying to think about additive manufacturing from nothing at all, as in using the molecules around us to create the Star Trek replicator that we all so long to have in our homes one day. Is this... do you see that future? Is that something that's being lived at MIT? Do you think this is, crazy talk and good marketing? Or is this the first part of this journey that we're embarking on now?
I feel like there's hope for this, but it's also, it's so complicated. I think it's really complicated, but I definitely think there's hope. What I wanted to bring up before was a project I did with MIT and Ministry of Supply that is about getting a garment and then with the robot arm heat shrinking it to your body. So it's heat active tailoring. So it's both worlds. It's tailoring, see? And it was all like fashion and business articles with tailoring. So woo. But again, this is like me and a few other people in a lab. It's nothing implemented in the world. So I think there's the big juxtaposition of like these ideas exist and how do they exist in the world. So I think if people start making them more scalable, including myself, obviously, there's a lot of hope. But right now, I think they're very micro. They're beautiful and micro and rare, but there's hope for them to get bigger.
I agree.
I will embrace this American positive approach. And actually, I do believe that the future of microfactories here in Europe is really brilliant. Here outside, in 80 square meters, we have a microfactory where we produce any kind of women dresses with digital print from white fabric with, in average, there will be 3 workers in this. Yeah? So it's an example. Yeah? The future belongs to mass customization, and mass customization should be localized, should be nearshored and then really onshore. Yeah?
I hope somebody in the audience is tweeting, because so many great tweetable things are being said on this panel right now. Beautiful.
Did we? Okay.
Pawel, let's continue with your glimpse into the future.
Please.
Would you like to also share your idea of where we're going, a look into the future?
I like to say only I agree with him.
Thank you so much, Pawel.
Okay, well, let's continue the circle around this way. Katarzyna.
Okay, so I have to underline that, as you said, that nobody is speaking about repair, nobody is encouraging nobody to do something with the clothes. I would like to underline that we have put on the market the Upcycle Do It With Us project, which is available on the website, where normal B2C, so for customers, they can send us the single pieces of the garments which they love, which they can't get rid of because they have some sentiments to us, and we will re-dye them, rewash them, upcycle them in the way they want, or redesign them as well. So we would like to encourage, and we are doing that as well, that future is in upcycling as well. If we don't have such materials or the possibilities to stop mass production and the fast fashion. So let's start from ourselves. Let's stop buying a lot of clothes. Let's start showing the fast fashion companies we are unhappy with the environmental impact, and then they will show that they must do something with that, and they will start doing. And then they will start find the solution how to get rid of the stocks.
Thank you.
That was a great statement.
Definitely.
Thank you.
It's a very quick final statement. I think let's not underestimate the role of design and creativity to finish also this designers bashing that you started a couple of minutes ago. Before we have drinks, otherwise we get trouble when we get out of the building. But if you put together, and this is, we only can solve these massive challenges that we're facing right now through collaboration, and not through collaboration with our peers only, but also with other disciplines. So since we're organizing hackathons and thinkathons, I know how much magic can happen when you put together a designer, a business developer, and a couple of engineers in one room, and then I'm very optimistic that we can solve those challenges. And through this collaboration, we will also establish a couple of smart and sustainable business models in the future that will be potentially very successful apart from fast fashion. So if this is not a feasible business, then it won't succeed.
Thank you all so much for this hopeful glimpse into the future as the closing panel, for me at least today, on this stage. Let's have a big round of applause for all the panelists, please. Save the best for last, really.
Especially for you, because as you say, it was a 6th panel for you today.
It's been quite the day. We have talked about so many things. Oh, thank you.